Welcome. I'm Neil, and co-hosting with me is Jane. How you doing, Jane?
I'm good.
Jane in Spain, and we both work for Wild Goose, of course, and we work with Sandra, Gail, and Iona. And Iona is the Zoom master tonight. So thanks very much, Iona. You're really good at that. Um, I feel comfortable with you at the helm. So tonight we have a whole bunch of readers. We have Martin Rowe, Katie Muniak, Sally Foster Fulton, Jan Such Pickard, Brian Woodcock, Carol Dixon, Pat Bennett, Janet Lees, and Tom Schumann. So I'll tell you just a wee bit about all those great folk uh, now. Martin Rowe is the author of Julian of Norwich's Teabag, Prayers and Poems from Morning to Night, and he's a regular contributor to Radio 4's Thought for the Day. He lives in London. Katie is a Canadian writer living in Cardiff. She's the author of The Pieces We Keep, which was published by Wild Goose, and The Aerialists and The Heart Beats in Secret, and those were published by the Borough Press, Harper's fiction literary imprint. Sally is the author of Hope Was Heard Singing, Resources for Advent, and she's the UK and Global Church Ambassador for Christian Aid. Jan is a storyteller and poet living in Mull. She's a former Abbey warden and was an ecumenical accompanier in Israel and Palestine, author of many books. Brian Woodcock is a former Iona Abbey warden who lives in Bristol. Carol lives in Northumberland. She's a hymn writer, contributor to many publications. Pat is a writer and liturgist based in Scotland. Janet is the author of Come Wind, Come Weather, A Pilgrim's Handbook of Prayers and Activities for the Length of Britain. And Tom lives in Columbus, Ohio, where he's a pastor and a prolific writer. And several of those folk are members or associates of the Iona community. Phew. So that's lots of folk. And tonight, this is part of a hopeful Advent with the Iona Community, which is a program the community has been offering this month. And Jane and I were kind of chatting about hope. The theme was the theme of hope, and where we see hope in the world, where we and when I asked that question, Jane, what do you think yourself?
Two things. One, weirdly, is this visual that I have in my head because marketing works. When Barack Obama was elected the first time, and there was that wonderful poster, which was by Shepard Fairey, a graphic designer, and it was half blue and half red, and it just had the word hope in giant letters at the bottom. And I remember that year, and I remember I live in Spain, for those of you who don't know, going to try and find a place where I could watch the inauguration ceremony, and just sitting in this funny Irish pub in Spain with a bunch of expat Americans, looking at the first man of colour to be elected president, and this surge of hope that went round the room, and just this incredible thing. So I had a really vivid memory of that night and that year when you asked me about hope. And then I was thinking about hope in general, because obviously things in America are not quite the same at the moment as they were then. So what still gives me hope? One of the things that really gives me hope is books, because it's what I've done my entire life, is work with books. And the fact that we have, I don't know, 70, 80 people here tonight online to read together poems and prayers and blessings and reflections and stories. The fact that the written word is still this really powerful force for good in the world. The fact that books still matter. I mean, I remember when we were told, oh, print is dead, it's all going to be ebooks and this is dead and that's dead. And none of it came true. In fact, people love printed books as much as ever they did. And just that power of the written word to really wake people's minds up and to move people and to reach people, that gives me hope. It'll always give me hope. And I just think I'm incredibly lucky that I got to work with books, that I get to work with Neil and Sandra and Gail and Iona, because it's truly one of the best publishing teams I've ever worked with. So my hope is more good words, more books, more writers, more gatherings.
Thanks, Jane. That was great. I'll read something from a Wild Goose book to start. It's from Wild Goose Wee Book of Prayers and Poems for Advent and Christmas. There's the title, or there's the cover, if you can see it. And this is by Kate McElhaga. Hope growing silently, secretly, like a child in the womb, fluttering, putting out soft fingers, hope stretching, stirring. Hope growing silently, secretly, daring to breathe again as footsteps recede and danger retreats. Hope stretching, stirring. Hope growing silently, secretly, swelling, burgeoning, bursting until the flower opens, the child is crowned, the prisoner is released, and hope is born. God of all hopefulness, for the seeds of silent growth and secret expectation, we thank you. Bring hope to birth in us. Release us that we may worship in freedom and joy. And I'll hand things over to Martin. And Martin.
Can you, am I coming through? Yeah, I guess I'm going through. So thank you very much. Well, I'm hopeful to be an associate member of a radical, subversive, generous, eccentric community named after Iona. And the little poem I'd like to read is not from that book, because I figure some people would have seen that already. But if you've ever visited Iona Abbey, you may have seen a copy of a painting on the stairwell, and it's a print from originally in the National Gallery in Edinburgh, which was by John Duncan from 1913, and it's called Saint Bride. And it depicts the ancient legend that Saint Bridget travelled to the Nativity to be the midwife at the birth of Christ. And in the painting, weirdly, if you think about it, you can see Iona Abbey, which is sort of founded around about the 1200s, in the background. And there's Bridget, who lived 500 or 600 years before that, and she's on her way to Bethlehem, which was another 500 years or so before that. So this is a little poem which I hope is going to be in a book that Neil's going to make happen next year. And the poem is called, excuse me, Call the Midwife. In the National Gallery in the city of Edinburgh, a saint goes first class from Iona to Bethlehem. A medieval journey, you can see the old abbey, carried on angel wings all the way to the Nativity. The cattle are lowing, even the donkeys in despair. Mary puts her mind deep inside a prayer. She calls the midwife from somewhere else in history. No one keeps a record of maternal immortality. The flight takes off long after she has died. What's a few hundred years when you're Bridget of the Isles? Touchdown comes long before she's even born. Normal rules don't apply when you're welcoming God's own. Way down below sounds a ringing of bells as brush, paint and palette become the Book of Kells. Illuminated painting, the one we're all in. Even Mary can't tell what a prayer will begin. They break into stories that they were never in. And when winter's over, they may announce spring. Brushing off laws of space and time. Next stop may be your place. Next stop may be mine. Friends who are gone now into the night. All the holy darkness that obscures our sight. Still, they may carry us on impossible flights. Another kind of history, another kind of light. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Martin. Hi, Katie. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing well.
That's good. It's nice
Glad to be here tonight.
nice to see you.
So, hope. Where I see hope in this season, there's 2 points of hope, and they're both seasonal ones. It's the focus that we get. First of all, the focus on rest and peace and newness that we get with Christmas, that spotlit hope of the child in the manger. And then the fact that that hope shifts back with the coming of the new year, back into our routines and our work, and we get new energy with it. That's a new focus. So having both of those is sort of a two-pronged hope that I celebrate at this time of year. The story that I would like to share with you comes from this book, The Pieces We Keep, which is a collection I wrote of stories that take us throughout the whole year. And this one is the first one in the winter section. It's called Isaiah Listening. The room is dark, the street below the window quiet. Pulled from sleep like a stubborn tooth, I now lie still, listening. My wife is sleeping and the children too. So what woke me? The students, perhaps, but their room is beyond the courtyard and they're a quiet lot anyway. Maybe there'd been a cart in the street, a man setting out early on his way to market, or a woman fetching water in the night, or maybe just a cat. The window is still black, and dawn feels a long way off, but there's nothing to be done. Awake is awake, and all I can do now is listen. Listening is my work, and it happens everywhere, at every time of day. The voice is never far away, no matter how hidden the face might be. Sometimes the voice is loud, vibrant, clear, and ringing, and I shake as I sing out its anger. Woe, a no one, and softer now, on that day. There are also times when I need to strain to hear, and I have wondered if it gets harder with each king I serve. Ahaz is my third, and these listening days are difficult indeed. We sit together, and he offers grapes, split figs, ripe cheese. He sits with a flaccid, pious face and says he's all ears. I don't know who he means to fool with this performance. If it were me, surely that would mean he cared about my thoughts, that he listened to me, but he doesn't. He won't. He's obstinate. And I'm too soft. My words are fluid in my mouth, too yielding, like the cheese. I have no strength when I tell him he should ask God for a sign, that the Lord instructs him to ask. But this king only smiles and shakes his head. He says he will not test the Lord. Instead, he's testing me. I'm sure of that. But I should not listen to kings, only to the Lord. In the dark morning, my ears are alert and I can't stay in bed. I'm no good at keeping still. My wife shifts beside me, turns and settles again, and I don't want to wake her. The children will be up soon enough. So I ease to standing and wrap another layer around my shoulders. When I climb to the rooftop terrace, I can see the faint beginnings of the day, a hint of lightning gray across the sky far to the east. The city is still hidden, the towers, the palace, the temple too, all only smudged shapes or sleeping things against a not yet waking sky. Ahaz would be sleeping too, and let him, I think, pushing him from my mind. Below, the streets must still be dark. Anyone down there would need to walk slowly, feeling their way. I settle, and the rug beneath me is cool and rough. I try to still my mind. I begin not with prayer, or not with words at least. I breathe and wait and listen. I'm glad to be alone. There aren't many hours in the day when I can sit unobserved. The students are great observers, and I'm so rarely left alone. They watch me when I eat, when I play with my children. They watch me pray and read. They watch me listen. Maybe they're learning something, although some days I wonder. They ask such strange questions. How do I do it? Where do I look for words? How do I know what symbols to use? How do I convince my wife to give our sons such names? Yesterday, I found myself talking at length about signs. I said all work was signs and songs, and they all nodded solemnly, and I felt silly. I shouldn't try and sum things up like that. The work isn't like that. It isn't straightforward. I thought then of singing a little, perhaps the new one with the vineyard and the tower. It's a good song, but it didn't seem like the afternoon for a song. So I told them instead how the work comes in pieces, just piece by piece, like a child's toy, like the notched logs my sons play with. You set piece on piece on piece until you see that without planning, you've built a tower. Things fit together. If you listen, you begin to see how. A sudden sound, a jump and scuttle, and a cat appears beside me in the graying morning. Seeing him, I know that he wasn't the one who woke me, something else then. But not a foot in the street, nor the creak of a bucket's handle. The shadow of a song, perhaps. Yes, I think so, a strong one, something new. Sitting very still on the cold roof, I begin to see its outlines, like the shape of a window in the night, the edge of the morning sky over the city, a door. The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Those who lived in the land of deep darkness, on them a light has shined. The song comes slowly, slow as night passes, but it comes.
Thanks very much, Katie.
Thank you.
Hi, Sally.
Hi, Neil. It's good to see you.
Good to see you as well.
Yeah. Hope. I've had a love-hate relationship with that word for years. Hope can be, if it's misused or used lightly, it can feel really trite when people are really struggling and, oh, I hope it goes okay. So, but then I love the roll your sleeves up kind of hope. So there's a cross your fingers kind of hope, and there's the roll your sleeves up kind of hope. And I learned recently that in a Quaker meeting, if somebody is presenting an idea and someone else responds, I hope so, that's a promise to help. It's not just a, ooh, I hope so. It's a, how can I help you? And that fills me with hope. I also had the best time last night. Didn't expect to have the best time last night, but we got stuck in Waverley Station. There was a signal breach, and the train that was supposed to leave at 7:30 left at 10:45, and three or four trains on the way to Glasgow Queen Street were on the same train, and people were a wee bit grumpy. And then all of a sudden, you had people standing everywhere and banged up against each other, and you heard at the end of the train this voice, get your tickets ready, and people started to really get annoyed. And then these two guys who'd obviously rolled out of the pub came wandering through and went, ah, got you. And the whole place erupted. And then the banter started and the stories started, and it was joyful. So that kind of stuff gives me hope. I want to share, it's from Hope. Oh, from Hope Was Heard singing. I'm working on some other stuff for Advent, but it's not quite ready, so I'm falling backwards into my old habits. But again, I wanted to share two short ones that are linked together, that reflect on the shepherds and that incredible story about where the message hit first. So the first is Sounds So Romantic. Sounds so romantic. In that region, there were shepherds living in the fields, keeping watch over their flocks by night. Christmas cake perfection with a little icing sugar sprinkled over like fairy dust. When actually, in that region lived the poorest of the poor, holed up, huddled together on a hill, putting their lives at risk to protect someone else's livelihood. In that region, the margin between rich and poor people gaped vast and ugly. And the angels had the audacity to sing about good news to the likes of them. And they had the audacity to listen. And what about today? If the angels spread their golden wings and swooped down from on high, where would this heavenly host appear, singing of glory and saying, do not be afraid? Or perhaps in that region where homeless live in shelters and under bridges, and in their best friend's settees from time to time, and in bedsits when the government gets its act together. In that region where children are afraid to go outside, children who've learned that they can't expect much from the world they've been dropped into, the one that's promptly let them fall through the cracks. The Christmas angels came singing, "Do not be afraid," in fearful places. They flew first to the ones most in need of good news, least likely to be looking for it or even expecting it, and quite frankly, with more reason than most to refuse the invitation to believe in anything as unlikely as hope. It is said that angels are simply God's messengers, bringing with them a simple, if unbelievable, possibility. It doesn't have to be this way, they say. Come and see this new thing that has been made known. If there is to be a stirring of angel wings, a new song building in the air, then in this region, God's messengers, you and me minus the halos, have to be audacious enough to sing in fearful places. And another short one related to that. Seems shepherds always get the worst of it. Seems shepherds always get the worst of it. Cold hillsides and rocky, barren places. Sheep and more sheep and sleepless nights counting them. No camels to ride or gifts to bear, no wisdom either, just secondhand news. Seems shepherds always get the worst of it. Bathrobes and tea towels in the back of the stage, sharing one line. Let us go to Bethlehem and see this thing that's been made known to us. No tinsel or glitter or golden wings. Seems shepherds always get the worst of it. Minimum wage and 0 hours contracts, no pension plan or savings account, no respect either. Just systemic injustice that keeps them firmly in their lowly places. Seems they had something in common with the baby they visited. Later, he would call himself a shepherd. Later, he would lay aside his wants for the needs of his sheep. Later, he would say, "If you love me, you'll feed my lambs." In the face of the worst, he would give his best. So there is wisdom. There is glory without the gold. And there is hope that there will be justice for those who always seem to get the worst of it.
Good evening, Jan.
Good evening.
Can you see the Abbey across the Sound?
Well, not now. It's dark, Neil. It's very dark. But yes, normally when the sun gets up in the morning, I can see it shining across on Iona, that we are still in darkness. Anyway, I'm going to read you a poem about hope that is very hard to see. And it's set among shepherds and farmers in the West Bank. When I was there during Advent one year, and it was really hard sometimes to see where the hope was because of destruction, because of oppression. But what I did see was the hope that is in people. And sometimes we can see that signs of that in the natural world. So I'm going to stop trying to paraphrase my poem and I'm going to read it. It's from this book, though it was earlier in another book produced by Wild Goose. And it's at one point in it, I quote one of the farmers who talks about what made him weep. So this is the poem for day 12 in the Advent book. In no man's land. The bulldozers were here a year ago, destroying an olive grove, uprooted trees, leaves shed out of season, and crushed limbs scattered on the earth. As young trees were taken away for replanting in settlements, soldiers held back the farmers. When I saw my olive tree dancing in the jaws of the bulldozer, then I wept. The torn earth lies bare, a military zone now, a no man's land. What will happen next? The people wait, steadfast and sad, and life goes on. Strangers are welcomed. Families need to be fed. Branches of the felled trees fuel backyard ovens, baking daily bread. Under the moon, behind locked gates, in the farmlands, wild pigs trample and devour crops that cannot be harvested. A white jackal runs like death among coils of razor wire. But under the sun, something is being unlocked. In the desert that was once an olive grove, from the root, the ravaged stock of an ancient tree that seemed gone forever, a shoot growing, tender leaves unfurling like a child's opening hand. Against all despair, a new beginning. Even here, even in no man's land. And when I saw it, I wept. I can't forget Gaza every day, but I hold on to that hope of God's creative power bringing us through.
Brian.
Yes. Hello.
Hello.
What gives me hope? There are two things I wanted to mention. The first is that 2 days before Advent began, so on the Friday before the first Sunday in Advent, which was the first day of December, I was listening to the Today programme on Radio 4, and it finished with a poem that was a complete knockout to me. If there was more time, I would read that, but that's not what we're doing, reading other people's poem. But this was called Motorway Music by Wendy Cope, and there was just something. Well, it's that really it was the fact that Radio 4 was actually finishing its programme on the political struggles of the day here and around the world with this poem, which was precisely what Advent is about. And it was just so surprising to hear it, and it's an amazing little poem. The second thing is that every so often an email comes through my computer, a candle in the window, sent by Peter Miller, and it's full of interesting quotes, very relevant and quite inspiring at times. And here is a person who is terminally ill, but engaged passionately with the life of the world and where it's going. And he's an inspiration to me. The covering email for this one that I picked up a few days ago simply is an anonymous quotation. Life is now in session. Are you present? And I just want to, that for me is a real sign of hope. The passion about the world and the future, when a lot of people would say, I haven't got a future. So we've all got a future. And we're all terminal, of course, eventually. Right, my reading is actually from Advent readings from Iona. And it's, for me, fascinating to go back to it. And I wanted to read from December the 12th, this day, however long ago it was, that Jan and I were warden and deputy warden on Iona at the time. And we knocked these readings together in desperation at the very last minute, just to be able to read an Advent thing which was different from all the books we could find. And this one is one that I wrote. So we never declare actually in the book who wrote which ones. And they always began with a little bit from, I think, probably the lectionary of that day. And then a reflection, well, the way I did it was a reflection and a prayer. And so this is what I did for, and then, much to my surprise, it all went into print. We weren't really thinking that that could happen when we knocked it all together. So much last minute that sometimes I was late for my meal because I was still writing the next one that had to be done that night. So there was a man, this is from John 1. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify to the light, so that all might believe through him. He was not himself the light, but he came to testify to the light. When I was a child, we had a dog which would understand but not obey. If you pointed to something, he just looked at it, completely ignoring all instructions, fetch. At least that was an improvement on our previous pet, a cat. Whatever you pointed to, the cat simply looked at the end of your finger. And the prayer is this. It isn't just John the Baptist who points the way, is it, living God? It isn't only the cry of a strange-looking man in a remote wilderness a long time ago that speaks of the light coming into the world. You surround us with signs of the presence of Christ among us, scriptures and people, events in our lives, art and science, song and story, birth and death, mountain and mustard seed, are all icons, pointing beyond themselves to a greater light, inviting us into divine encounter and transformation. Let us never take for granted the signposts that you give, nor despise the lone voice or sacrificial life. But forgive us in this age of instant access, when we fail to look beyond the pointer or go further. Give us imagination to seek that which is still hidden, patience to wait, the will to travel on, courage to reach towards the things we cannot grasp, humility to be led and met and taught and loved by you. May we thank but never idolize messengers you send, but rather hear the message and hunger for the light.
Thank you, Brian. Yeah, I was on Iona at that time when at the genesis of that book, and I think the last straw was I came up to you and I said, well, we found Delia Smith's readings for Advent, Brian. And you said, that's it, we're writing a book. Nothing wrong with Delia Smith. She's a great cook, but, you know. Anyway. Okay, good evening, Carol. I think you're muted, Carol.
This wonderful opportunity of seeing some of my fellow writers and yourself, of course. I used your little book yesterday, the little book you compiled, when I was leading worship for our midweek service. I've been a lay preacher in the United Reformed Church for 45 years. And now I really enjoy leading the midweek service because we're all elderly and we sit down the whole time through it. So I use Pat's beautiful one and also the one that I'm going to read in a minute or two. But you asked me as well to think about hope and what gives me hope. And it's a bit of a bizarre thing that gives me hope. It's my 8 grandchildren who are aged between 2 and 18, and they're so helpful and caring, not just to me, but to people around them. Even the 2-year-old helps set the table. And the older ones care really passionately about the environment and things, which is wonderful to see because they think they've just discovered it. I grew up in the 60s and we thought we'd just discovered it as well then. But it's lovely to see their passion and their enthusiasm. And all 8 of them, for different reasons, just give me such hope for the future. And they're so enthusiastic about everything. So that, for me, is hope. Because my little prayer from the book is very short, I hope you won't mind me adding on another little poem after it. The piece from the book's called Christmas Prayer. You came as a baby, Lord, as a little helpless child who relied on a human family to care for him. You cried because you were hungry, because you were homeless, because you were a stranger, far away from home. You still cry with hunger, Lord, in the voices of the many starving. Your tears still flow for the homeless, the lonely, and the forgotten. You still rely on human families to care for you. And so this Christmas, Lord, we pray, help us to be the kind of people who look for you in the world and joyfully discover you as we care for one another. And the poem is called A Rose, a Rose, and it's based on the 15th century carol Es ist ein Ros entsprungen. A rose, a rose. In the dark recesses of winter world, a sleeping seed germinates. Cocooned within the womb, a fetus flexes fragile fingers, tipped with tiny nails. Birth beckons. A journey begins. Darkness gives way to light. Hidden in the humus of a stable yard, a simple rose grows, and on Christmas morning blossoms. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Carol. Hi, Pat.
Hi, Neil. Good to see you.
See you too.
When I was thinking about hope, really, what came to me, and I think very much resonates with what you were saying, Brian, and also something that came out in the poem that the piece that Sally read, the second piece. And again, it's a kind of a two-pronged thing. I think where I find hope is in my friends, the lives I see around me of people just persevering and being faithful in the small things. And in the face of that, of everything that's going on, it's so easy to think there is no hope. I can't do anything. Nothing will change. And so when I look at lives around me, people just being faithful in their own small way to the things which are things of their lives. So yes, that's where I finding hope at the moment. And for me, that's linked to the hope I always remember and find encouragement in this season of Advent is the hope that I perpetually find in the incarnation, and in the sense that God is present in the world, God is committed to the flesh, to the life of the world, and is at work in it continuously through the lives of people. And so the piece that I'd like to read is a prayer which is connected with that, and it's from a much older book, Hay and Stardust. And Brian read a little bit from the opening of John's Gospel, which is a passage we hear a lot at this time of the year. And this also relates to that passage, but the beginning part of it, this great prologue of John, which sets out this great story of the incarnation. And this is a prayer in response to that passage, and a prayer really that incarnation, that unfolding would continue on through me. So this is simply called Prologue, and it's a prayer in conversation with the opening of John's Gospel. Inspiring word, move over the chaos within me, calling forth form and order, that I may know you in my shaping, and in the shaping, surrender my life to yours. Illuminating word, pierce the darkness within me, calling forth insight and understanding, that I may know you in my seeing, and in seeing, follow the way of your kingdom. Incarnate word, indwell the life within me, calling forth passion and purpose, that I may know you in my living, and in living, embody you in the world.
Thanks very much, Pat. Janet.
Thank you, Neil. In case you're not sure, my name is Janet Lees, and I recently had a book published by Wild Goose, which is called Come Wind, Come Weather. And it was about my walk from Land's End to John O'Groats, which I did in 2019. Now then, I'd really like to try, if possible, to inject a little bit more multi-generationalness, I'm not sure that's a word,
it is now,
in this event. You see, I look at us here, and we seem a bit mono-generational to me. I realise there's one or two exceptions to that, Iona. But, well, we do need a bit more of a younger element, don't we? So I'm going to tell you about Hope. Hope is actually one of the main characters in my first novel, which I'm just finishing now, and which I hope will be published next month by Longdendale Press. Hope comes from the north of England, a city in the north of England. Sounds very like Sheffield to me, but you know. And she's 10 years old in the story, which is set in 2050, and it's a dystopia. Hope is a non-verbal child who communicates using sign language. And the experience of living alongside young people like Hope comes from my former profession as a speech and language therapist, as well as my work as a school chaplain. So I don't want to give all the games away about Hope and all those that travel with her, or her parents, Justice and Joy, or any of the other people that live in the disused shopping mall on the edge of that city in the north of England. But please look out for Hope and the rest of them when they come out in January. The book is called Surplus to Requirements. And it's about what happens when the Required to Die Act comes in 2040. 10 years later, Hope and others are faced with some of the consequences that come from a regime that has decided that people like her are surplus to requirements. Hope is also something I find in this valley of Longdendale here in Derbyshire. I'm glad to say that it's full of hope, and the most hopeful thing at this time of the year is the sound of the geese. The Longdendale Valley is a bit of a goose highway, and in the winter, the geese come down from the north as they're going east to the wash. Well, you've got to wash somewhere, haven't you? And then in the spring, they go from their wintering grounds in the wash all the way back again. And they use the highway going north up the valley. Well, whatever direction it is, I get confused. But anyway, they're going back to their summer and spring breeding grounds in the north of the Arctic, Canada, Greenland, Iceland. So they make a great honking noise when they do that, and they do it a lot. But it is the most joyful of sounds. And of course, Wild Goose Publications, in fact, bears their mark, the wild goose going with the wind and the weather. Well, I'm going to read to you something that I did originally write for children and young people I worked with when I was a school chaplain in Yorkshire. And it was the reading for yesterday, which was December the 11th in the little wee Advent book. And it's about a message. It says, I have a message for you. And at the time, even then, I mean, I think I must have written this at least 6, 7, 8 years ago. The whole mobile phones thing and smartphones and schools and all of that was, you know, already top of the sort of nagging on kind of bit of agenda someone had somewhere. And so that's why I wrote about the message. And that's what this is about. I have a message for you. said the angel. It's not a film, or a film of a book, or a book, or a play, but a message. It's not satire or tragedy. It's neither soap nor opera. It's not a tweet or a text, but a message. It's not a Snapchat or an Instagram or a YouTube clip, but a message. God has chosen you. It's not a bit part or a supporting role. It's your whole life that has attracted God's attention. There are no lines to learn. It's completely unscripted. Just live your life in tune with God's call and in response to God's love growing in you daily. Listen. You can hear the message echoing round the world. Glory to God in the highest, peace on earth. Now you try.
Thanks very much, Janet. I'll look forward to reading your novel.
Well, thank you, Neil, because you were one of the people that encouraged me to continue working on it, so I'm most grateful.
Tom in Ohio, the Buckeye State.
Yeah. Greetings.
Yeah, always used to live near you across the Canadian border near Detroit, Windsor. So I'll give you in that place. Spent
Right.
years there. I always go there in my head. Hope you're well. Think of your
Doing
country.
well, thank you.
Keep your country well. Anyway.
Thinking of hope, I over the last year or so have gained, especially considering the political climate in the States, I have gained a lot of hope from the numbers of new members and new associate members that are joining the Iona community. And I think bringing new life and new hope and new voices to the community, especially folks from the southern hemisphere of the world. And given what we're going through over here right now, I took a lot of hope from a picture that a friend shared today on social media, walking through their neighborhood, and all the homes here decorated for Christmas. They have inflated snow people and Santa Claus and reindeer and that kind of stuff. And there's one house that simply put up a big lighted sign that said, resist. And I think that gives me a lot of hope that people are not giving up hope here, considering the situation we're going through. I'm going to share two pieces tonight that I've just written in the last week or so. The first is from Psalm 130, verses 1 and 2. Out of the depths I cry to you, O Lord. Lord, hear my voice. Let your ears be attentive to the voice of my supplications. We know the quiet of mornings as the world bustles awake and the grieving lie in beds made so much bigger by the absence of loved ones. We know the reticence of midday, eating our stale sandwiches, sipping on the cup of bitter tears at the table where the forgotten always find a reserved sign. We know the silence of nights when the voices of the mockers drown out the whispers of children offering prayers crafted from the whispers of loneliness. And because you listen to the cracking of the hearts which everyone refuses to hear, we know we are never alone. And then the second is from a passage from Isaiah. O house of Jacob, come let us walk in the light of the Lord. Isaiah 2, verse 5. We tiptoe through the shadows of our fears, our fingertips brushing along the walls bricked by loneliness, desperately trying not to trip over anyone who might already have given up finding home. And then, there in the far distance, we see a small flame flickering, slowly drawing closer to us until we see it held in your hand, your other reaching out to grasp us and walk with us. So together we can turn the corner and see the bright light of Advent hope welcoming us. Blessings.
Thanks, Tom. Okay, so that's so this is the part of the evening as we're closing where you can win a free book. So I'm going to give you a quote, and if you can tell me who the writer is, you email me at Neil, Neil, at ionabooks.com with the correct answer. And the first correct answer, I'll send you a free book. It's on me. You can have any Wild Goose book you want. All you have to do is get the correct answer. And I think you probably will. So maybe this is a matter of, who's quickest on the draw. So the quote is, and just tell me the author, and this goes to Neil at ionabooks.com. First correct answer, free book. Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. So you tell me who wrote that, and the first correct answer will receive a free book, any book you want from Wild Goose. That'd be a nice Christmas gift. You could keep it yourself. You could give it away, whatever you want. I just want to thank everyone who read tonight and who spoke, and it was really beautiful. And thanks for everyone who came. Thanks for everyone who puts Wild Goose. If you buy a Wild Goose book, it really helps. Thanks very much to Jane, for my co-host. Jane, do you have any words to end with?
Same as you, Neil. Thank you so much to everyone. I mean, when you work in book publishing, you work in these quite solitary days where you're at your computer all day and we have emails, and it's rare that we actually get face-to-face time with our writers, and even rarer that we get it with our readers. So these events really mean a lot to us. So we totally appreciate everyone who takes the time to do it. And I loved everybody's reading tonight. Everybody had a different angle and a different thing to say. And it was just really great. So thank you. It means a lot to all of us.
I think Andrew's very politely has his hand up. Hi,
Yes,
Andrew.
I do. I'd messaged Iona to ask this question. I've been doing some of the press for gratitude and concern for the online daily service for the new year. We're running low on stock. And it occurred to me that several of tonight's poems and prayers would make very good readings for the online daily service. So I wondered, is there a mechanism for asking the writers if I can download the audio file from the recording tonight, whether I can simply then use that recording, and then they don't have to do it again. It's just a permission, I suppose, to use their voice, and with full acknowledgement. So it was just a plea to I mean, if it can be done, it can be done technologically, but may I, rather than can I? So maybe I should have thought to ask before. I'm afraid it just
We could just,
If any of the readers don't want to be included, give me a message or an email and I'll make sure that you're not.
Is that acceptable? But thank you. Some of them will be great. And it's just the audio. It's not the video. It's just the audio that I'd be downloading, I think. Oh, it's Zoom,
Also to say, while we've got Andrew on here, read his book too. Andrew has a really great book for young people. And if you've got young people in your life, and Janet, you're right, we didn't have enough young people here, but he has a really great book called Columbus Travels out.
I've just had an 80-something-year-old member of the community write to me and say how much he learnt about Columba from reading the book. And he's gladly now telling other people. So it's not just for young people.
Of course not. And multi-generational community includes all, it goes across the whole thing, as indeed it does in the book I've just been writing, which also, interestingly, includes Columba.
I don't know what Jan thinks, but I think a good way of just ending now would be, would you be able to read Carrying a Candle at all, Jan? Or is that not like, do you not have it handy there?
Oh, you're muted, Jan.
Are you away now, Jan? Or I guess
Unmute. I can see that she's trying to unmute.
okay.
While Jan's working on that, there's a question in the chat for Brian. What was the name of the
Yeah.
poem?
The name of the poet is Wendy Cope. I don't know. The poem has only just been written for a new book that's come out. I can't remember what it's called, but
actually, Brian, if you just put it into a search engine, the title, you'll find the poem straight away. That's what I did.
Right.
While we were talking. Motorway
music.
That's right. If you just put motorway music, Wendy Cope, into a search box, it comes up straight away because I just found it that way.
Okay, fine. Thank you. I've got it written out myself. I don't know how I got it, but
I think there's actually
good.
a whole small little book of them, all around Christmas and
Yes.
Advent that came out a couple of years ago. It's a tiny little thing. As I know, my daughter gave it me in my Christmas stocking a couple of years ago, and the poems in there are absolutely lovely.
Yeah.
They're a lot of them would make you, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't think what it's called. I might be able to find it on my shelf. It's a great book, little book.
Well, in the absence of Jan.
Jan,
I'm here. I've got. Sorry, I don't know whether it was Zoom or some malign presence, but I kept getting muted again. All right, I will raise my voice. I will also raise a candle. These are candles that were made in Bethlehem, and I suppose as a small sign of hope, I ordered some from Amos Trust and gave them out at the strangely secular carol service that we have on the Ross of Mull. I won't light it now. The poem Reflection is called Carrying a Candle. Carrying a candle from one little place of shelter to another is an act of love. To move through the huge and hungry darkness, step by step, against the invisible wind that blows forever round the world, carrying a candle is a sign of foolhardy hope. Surely it will be blown out. The wind is contemptuous. The darkness cannot comprehend it. How much light can this tiny flame shed on all the great issues of the day? It's as helpless as a newborn babe. Look how the human hand that cradles it has become translucent, fragile and beautiful, foolish and loving, step by step. The wind is stronger than this hand, and the darkness infinite. Around this tiny here and now flame, what wavers but keeps burning, carried with such care through an uncaring world, from one little place of shelter to another, an act of love. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness can never put it out. Thank you for God's hope shining in the people I've heard tonight and the faces I've seen.
Thank you. Oh, Neil, I think you're on mute, but I think unless anyone else wants to say anything or ask a question, thank you a million times for coming. It was a really lovely evening. So really, really appreciate it. Neil, you're on mute. You have the final word.
No, I just thank you for coming. Take care.